Yeah, you feel like that now. See how you feel after I'm done. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. This is a study of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what happens a lot of times, this is my experience with the book. And a lot of times when I share, people get upset with what I have to say, because a lot of it's just from the book. And it goes contrary to a lot of the stuff that we've been taught in the fellowship as what is actual fact, what isn't fact, what is BS, and what isn't BS. So what happened in the fellowship now, there's a lot of information that you can't tie back to the actual program. It's a lot of stuff that sounds good, but it really doesn't work when it comes to combating alcoholism. And it isn't really a part of our fellowship, and it isn't what we endorse, right? We only endorse one course of action that's outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why we have how it works. It was put together. It's conference-approved literature. There's a lot of other things that happen in the fellowship that's not conference-approved literature, and people get upset when I mention it, like Back to Basics is not conference-approved literature. But a lot of people in AA will think they're doing the steps. You're doing somebody else's version of the steps. It's the same when Novelco came into the fellowship of AA. That is also not AA-approved literature. They used the outside Red Book, and somebody formulated a course of action designed for people who were in prison, right? So the history is very important, where stuff comes from and the purpose of where it comes from. One of the things that we're going to kind of look at is I had cheat notes, and I think somebody stole them, so I guess I'm winging it after all. Anybody on the back of your pages here? You got you see on the back of your page, anybody got some writing on one of them? Can I get that from you? I know I should have kept an eye on you, right? Huh? She comes over real meek, asking a couple questions, and my notes are gone, right? So well, that's good. I think the person beside her copped to it, right? That's it. I don't think you'll understand any of that. Okay, you have one of those. Yep, this one here. There you go. So, it reminds me of, it was kind of new, I was in treatment, and three of us were carrying on, 3 people in treatment. This lady walks over and goes, so, we're having a meeting in the next room. Can you guys keep it down? I said, oh yeah, what kind of meeting? She says, Al-Anon. Me and my friend started joking a bit, and we said, well, what does that mean? She goes, all 3 of you knew? We said, yeah. She says, I don't got time to explain it 3 times. Okay, so anyhow, it's going to be one of those meetings, right? As I was saying last night, there's something that really magical happens as the result of this thing. A lot of the stuff that I got from my sponsor, who taught me. It was Chuck R. And he was connected to the first 100 Men and Women. And if you kind of go through this, we are all connected to the first 100 men and women, because they kind of put this thing together, right? And so by the time this thing got published and was out within the first year, there came with like over 1,000 members in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. This thing started really taking off. And so one of the things is Chuck taught me how to live these principles. George, Jerry, and those guys were the guys that conned me into this thing. And there's a formula in here, there's a recipe that a lot of people really don't know. And I don't want to offend people again. People get easily offended. I'm under the impression that from what I've heard and seen, a lot of people we're getting away from the mechanics of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is our program. This is our program. This is our fellowship. The fellowship in itself will change the message. If I started a conversation over here and I asked you to pass that on, by the time the message came back to me, what I started over here, it would be totally different. That's why they put this in print. And it's a collective experience of the first 100 men and women, and since then, thousands. And what happens is we start changing things because we're a little self-centered. I don't know if anybody's kind of tuned into that, right? And so that's why when you kind of look at this thing, and on the back of your page, I'm going to ask kind of questions. And all this thing does is it takes you through the course of action that's in the book. So what you kind of, if you see on the first page, it kind of explains this here sheet here. And it kind of talks about the preface. And it brings you in an introduction. So if you go to the preface of your book later when you're at home, you read 2 pages and you see what you get out of it. And then this will guide you to what they're hoping you get out of it. So you start getting book-based recovery, right? Because a lot of people, if you're kind of new and you read this, you'll miss 98% of it. You hear people say, oh, go to How It Works, or read it and try to find yourself. Well, if you don't know what you're looking for, you kind of pass the whole thing. And what happens is in Alcoholics Anonymous is we put too much onus on a new person to figure this out and to find this thing. And that's like telling a new guy or a new girl who started in 2 seconds or 5 seconds in a movie as an extra. And they bring all their friends to the movie to watch this movie, and they're looking for themselves. Well, they're only spending 2 seconds in that movie, right? So you missed the whole movie looking for yourself. But if you stood back and kind of looked at the movie, somewhere along the line you say, yeah, you see me in that part, I see. And that's kind of like the way the book's designed. The book's designed is to educate us on what is alcoholism. You don't have to be an alcoholic to read the book. It was designed to educate and inform those who may be afflicted or associated with people who suffer from alcoholism, to better understand the alcoholic. So a lot of people, when they read this, you'll kind of get what alcoholism is and what alcoholism isn't, because a lot of people are really confused. A lot of people confuse behavior problems with alcoholism, and they're two different things altogether. You hear people say, oh, I do this because I'm alcoholic. You ever hear people say that? No, you do that because you're immature. It has nothing to do with alcoholism. Right? Alcoholism is an illness, and it's twofold as we go through here. So on the first page, on the back of the page, we're going to ask some questions. You ask the first thing that comes to mind. So just grab your page, turn it to the back, and I'll ask you a question, and then I'll show you the answer. And you got to write down the first thing that comes to mind, right? And it doesn't matter. You could cheat with the person beside you, but it's to see how educated you are on the information that Alcoholics Anonymous presents and the whole design of this thing. So what you get to see is, well, do I need to conform some of my thinking to the ideas that are present here, or I'm happy with my ideas and that's it, and I don't give a rat's ass, right? Or do I want to enhance my sobriety and those that are around me? So the first question is, and think about it for a second, do we recover from this illness? So write down yes or no. Because you hear a lot of people say a lot of different ideas within our fellowship. Haven't you? It's kind of confusing. So the first thing you hear a bunch of people say, we do recover. Another group of people say, we don't recover. Another group of people saying, I am recovering. And so it's a very confusing question. Do we recover from this illness or not, right? So if you go to the first page of the big book, if you have one, it talks about Alcoholics Anonymous. The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So the answer is yes, we do recover. Where do you see that? It's in the first page of our book. Oh, it's turning into a lynch mob already. So it talks about here that we do recover from alcoholism. Whoa, so if I'm still engaged in certain, I need to understand what alcoholism is, whether I'm engaging in those behaviors or not, right? Because there's my living problem, and then there's alcoholism, which is two different things. You hear people say, well, I was an alcoholic before I even drank. Impossible. There's only one way to find out if you're alcoholic, is you have to drink. I mean, it may sound surprising, but if you've never drinking, then you would never know you're alcoholic. Well, you may have had living problems. Anybody ever have teenagers will know. Living problems. Every one of them have the characteristics of alcoholics, right? Selfish, self-centered, self-serving. So you need to understand the two things. So when they talk about here's the other thing, the way we think, right? So here's another thing. It says the story of how many thousand men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. Write down what's the most important statement there. And we're just getting started, right? It's going to be one of those meetings. What's the most important statement in what they just said there here? The story of how many thousand men and women who have recovered. What would you write down what you think is the most important part of that statement?
Can you repeat that, Tony? Sorry.
Again, what's the most important part of this statement in the beginning of the book? The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. This is how our brains work. So you need to write down what's the most important most important part of that statement, which you would say, which you would pass on to somebody else. Right? What would be the most important part that you would talk to somebody else about in that statement if you had to explain it? Anybody want to give me an answer? How many people say the recovered part? How many people not participating? It's actually the story.
That's what I wrote.
It's the story. Because that's the important. Anybody ever been to court here? What's your story? Right? They want to know the story. Because without the story, that's the magic part of this thing, is the story. I mean, we used to be like this, and you went through a course of action, and now you're like this. That's a pretty amazing story when you think about it, when you see these people who are afflicted with alcoholism, right? And then something happened beyond understanding that allows them to live free from the illness that was killing them. That's a pretty remarkable story. And this is only the first page. So we're going to get into this thing. As they start getting into this thing, you kind of follow along real fast. I'm just going to hit some highlights here. The preface, they talk about Roman numeral X1. They talk about, because this book has become the basic text of our society, has helped such large number of men, alcoholic men and women, to recover, there exists a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left untouched. So for the first time, they tell you where the actual AA recovery program is. And where is, write down, if somebody was to ask you, hey, where's the AA recovery program, what would you tell them? Write down your answer, what you would tell these people.
I don't know if I'd say they recovered, but their lives got more manageable.
I'm not
Stable.
going to get into a debate. I just go with what the book says, right? You could take.
Lifestyle got stable or manageable.
I've recovered, so from that condition, I'm no longer afflicted with it. That allows me to stay sober. So that's why it's a book study. Like I said earlier, there'll be some conflicting information, mostly within the people who are listening to new information, right? And sometimes it challenges our own thinking because we've been steadfast at looking things for so long and hanging on to things, and we're saying, well, we're going to look at Alcoholics Anonymous' view on this, because this is our basic text put together by who? Alcoholics Anonymous. So we have a lot of different ideas and approaches and a lot of different theories and a lot of different things that we need to kind of break it down to what the book says. What you do with that is entirely up to you, right? You could agree with it, disagree with it. That's the beauty about the fellowship of AA. The only requirement for AA membership is what? A desire to stop drinking. You don't have to believe any of this. You don't even have to be sober. It helps, but you don't even have to be sober. Right? So the question was, and here, where would you find the AA recovery program? So there you go. So that's the common thing, that somebody told you that. First 164 pages, right? Did it say that here? What did it say here? Where would you find the AA recovery program? The first portion. So the first portion, they're setting up an idea. So the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left untouched because it works. It's a formula that works for people who are afflicted with alcoholism. What we were talking about last night is we get a lot of stuff that picks up a lot of speed in the fellowship because we think it sounds good, it makes sense. If you don't understand the basis of it, then a lot of stuff gets mileage. Like you hear people say, oh, acceptance is the answer to all my problems. Well, and nothing happens in God's world by mistake. We'll explain that later, but they fully don't expand on what they mean by that, right? Or surrender. And new people are hearing this stuff, oh, I need to surrender, or once I do step one, or once we hear stuff it's not backed up in our literature. But it sounds good. So somebody at some meeting somewhere said, oh, the recovery program is in the first 164 pages. That sounds good. So a new person heard that person say that, or they got taught that, and it started picking up speed. So pretty soon everybody was saying that. And then you say, well, where does it say that? It doesn't say that anywhere. But we believe it to be true because we've been told by a lot of people. I used to think that too until I started studying this. So the first portion, if I'm doing the first 164 pages, what am I missing? Doctor's opinion. I'm missing the forwards. I'm missing the preface. I'm missing the introduction to this whole thing. Right? So I'm missing all that information. So what happens is as we go through it, it sets us up to what this is all about. And so actually when we get in this, the actual recovery portion of this is the forwards, right? The first edition and the first 88 pages. It's the first 88 pages, and we'll get into that after. I'm going to make it so it's going to be steel on steel for some of you people. Like it's going to, because after page 88, they talk about this change having acquired in us. We have the same experience as the first 100 men and women putting this together. The rest of the book's designed and carrying this message and practicing these principles. That's why it starts 89 is working with others. They talked about this experiencing happening in your life. Now, how could I better carry this message to other people? Working with others, a vision for you, to the wives, to the employers. All talks about enhancing these principles in all our affairs. Right? It talks about if you don't have that change, then how can you carry this message? Right? That's why this thing is all put together. It's put together by people. When Ebby visited Bill, he had this change. He had a recipe, and Bill was dying of alcoholism. So when Ebby carried this message to Bill, he explained it in such a way that made sense to Bill, and he seen it was obtainable if he did the same thing he did. And once he did that, as he lied in the hospital, what did Bill think? There's other people that might benefit from this thing. And here we are in 2019 with the same basis of information, but explained in such a way it's more palatable or more understandable that we could all obtain it. So that's what the basic text is. So in here it says the program of recovery is laid out in the first portion of the basic text. That's what it says, not me. That's what it says. So then if we go forward to the first edition, we're going to get some ideas here that they start with this thing, right? So forward to the first edition talks about here, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So they talk about the idea here is that basically there's over 100 of them. And since then, thousands. This is the fourth edition, and they've never changed it. So all the conferences, all the people, all the meetings, all the stuff, they've never changed this formula or this idea, because that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is. They're saying here that we found a solution to a dilemma that might be killing you, right? And we all agree what the problem is, we all agree what the solution is, and we all agree what the course of action is. We all agree on that. And to show you, the reader, how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So we're going to have a conversation with you, the reader, on our experience of what we found to be the problem, what we found to be the solution, what we found to be the course of action. So what the reader needs to do is be armed with facts about himself. So when they talk about that, and this is another part that we've gotten away from in sponsorship, right? Because it's the sponsor's job to educate and guide a new person through this process. Once they've done the steps, it's to educate them about the traditions, about service work, it's about getting them involved. So what happens is when I got sober in North Vancouver and Vancouver area, you had to get on a wait list to get on the phones. All the committees, all these people, like it was an honor, it was a real privilege for a group to run the phones, to be a part of service, to be set up, business meetings, to be a member in good standing. You had to be involved in some form of service and at your business meetings and involved in your home group. If you weren't in good standing, you weren't going to business meetings, you weren't involved in any good service. You were just participating in the fellowship drawing off of something. You weren't participating in giving back. Right, so when they talk about here, these people put something together that they might help other people with their experience, strength, and hope. And they're going to show us how they did it. And they're going to show us how they recovered from what? A seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So at this stage of the game, I don't know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about. So being a basic text, I'd have to get educated on alcoholism from their perspective. So I need to understand the problem from whose perspective? Theirs, which is we understand is step one. And it also, within our first tradition, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. We have one stance on this and one approach and one idea of this. And if the group sticks together on the idea of this, then the person who's looking for a solution will find it a lot faster, and they'll have one answer to the problem that they're suffering from. They'll have one solution that we offer as a means of recovery. But if you go to a group as a new person, you're given all these different ideas. Who's the only one dying of alcoholism is the new person. Because they don't really know what's going on because they're not getting educated anymore. So if you kind of go back where they talk about here on the basis of recovery. So on 92, they talk about what our job is in 12-stepping people. So it's actually working with others. This is an actual pretty phenomenal chapter if you ever get a chance to read it. And they talk about here, the first thing we do is to educate people what the fellowship is. On your first meeting, they talk about the fellowship of AA and what we do and what's the purpose of it. That's why they read the preamble at every meeting. The fellowship is not the program. Because if a person comes in being new, thinks this is the program, they'll be under the delusion by coming to meetings, you'll be able to keep them sober. Nowhere does it say that in our literature. But once you start changing it, you may understand what you're saying, having been around here for a while. I'm in the program since I come to the program, but it's an incorrect statement. Right? So that's why they talk about here on your first visit, explain the fellowship of AA and what we're all about. We share our experience, strength, and hope that those who are suffering from alcoholism, you come and find an answer to their dilemma. And once having found that answer, in turn, help other people. That's what they talk about here. And also on page 92, they talk about when dealing with a new person, our job is to educate them on what alcoholism is, of the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So if you had a new person walk up to you and say, hey, what's this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body? What are they admitting that they're powerless over? Write down on your piece of paper what you tell them. New person walks up to you and say, hey, what's the step one that they're talking about up there? What are they admitting to of being powerless? What makes them powerless over alcohol? What would you tell them? As a new person, they're looking to you for guidance because you've been around here a little while. You act like you've been sober. You act like you have an answer. So this person's looking for guidance from you. What would you tell them? Right? So a lot of people, like my 11 years in and out, nobody explained to me alcoholism the way it's designed here. One of our jobs as members of AA with new people is we give them big books, but we don't tell them to read it and go through it and guide them through it. Part of our job is there's probably people in this meeting right now who's never read the big book. I was one of those people, 11 years. I was given a big book and told to do the steps. So I'm in 12 and 12 study thinking I'm doing the steps, but I'm reading somebody else's experience of having done the steps, trying to get the same experience as him. That was written 13 years after. I've never been taken through the big book. The first time I got taken through the big book and I understood the problem from their perspective, the solution from their perspective, and the course of action they took, and I incorporated that in my life, I've been sober ever since. So there's got to be something to this, right? Like I said, I've been 41 years in AA. I've been sober as the result of the program outlined in this book a little over 30 years now. It was pretty remarkable. I've been sober longer on this side, like I'm 57 now. When I got sober, I was 27. So that's pretty much, so 27 years absent of this way of life, got introduced to this way of life, and I've been sober ever since. It's pretty remarkable. So there's got to be something to this maybe, eh? Rarely have we seen a person fail who has still followed our path, but if you don't know what the path is, then it's kind of like where you're stuck. So I've listened to people, and if you suffer from alcoholism, do you keep yourself sober? Are you capable of keeping yourself sober? But you hear people saying that, as long as I don't take the first drink, I'll be okay. Every day I remind myself, don't drink. Are you brand new? Then that would make sense. Have you been here more than a month or a month and a half? Then you're in trouble with that kind of thinking. I don't think about it anymore. The obsession is left. You're in trouble because you don't understand alcoholism. What you just told the group is you don't understand alcoholism, and a responsible member of AA should be talking to you afterwards. Say, hey, have you ever read page 92? Have you ever seen what our job is in working with new people? They talk about this thing. So, getting back to the answer here is, what would you tell the new person of what alcoholism is? That makes them powerless over alcohol. What made these people powerless over alcohol? What made them say this statement? What makes me alcoholic? What makes me of the hopeless variety? Those are good questions, right? Most people would write down on their page is that they're powerless. That doesn't say nothing. Or they have an obsession, which is incorrect. right? People who have an obsession with alcohol hasn't done step 1 yet. Anybody getting kind of, well, let's go through the book. So let's kind of, you'll answer yourself. So at the end of the meeting, you could answer these questions. So what is the purpose of the doctor's opinion then, if they're just starting off with trying to educate us on what they deem to be a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body? What is the purpose of the doctor's opinion? Is to explain what they mean by a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, right? And so as the doctor starts going through this, and I'll give you some highlights, he talks about here in the first page, he talks about not only did I deal with these alcoholics on a hopeless state on a continuous basis. I worked in the town's hospital specializing in alcohol and drug addiction. I watched this patient or this person come through our facility that's been here 3 times. On his 3rd time, he acquired some ideas that he put into practice, and this miraculous thing happened that I witnessed. I witnessed this thing happen in the hospital in 1934. If you can imagine the setting there. And he says, I allowed this patient in turn to start working with other people. On his 3rd visit, he says he witnessed this miracle happening. That's pretty remarkable when you think about that, right? And so as he goes through here, he says these men, these alcoholic types, can never safely use alcohol in any form whatsoever. Why is that? What is the first symptom in alcoholism?
Your life is unpredictable and volatile.
But that's not the first. So
Lack of control.
see, so now you guys understand what you're talking about. This is what I was talking about. As a new person, you've not answered my question.
If you honestly, when you honestly want to, you can't control your hunger.
Okay, you're saying the second part, but what's the first part to that? Why is that? What is the first symptom in alcoholism?
Mental obsession.
The mental obsession is not the first symptom in alcoholism. I could have, huh?
The physical allergy.
The allergy. The allergy is the first symptom in alcohol. That explains why I can't stop once I start. I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. So the first symptom in alcohol is the allergy. From it stems the phenomenon of craving. That's what the doctor says. He notices that these people, these allergic types, can never safely use alcohol in any form whatsoever because they have an abnormal reaction, which is the allergy, which is the body, a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So they just described the first symptom in alcoholism was the allergy. Well, I don't have an allergy. Let us explain it to you. That when you take a drink, or when we take a drink, or when they take a drink, they trigger this thing called the phenomenon of craving. They get thirstier when they drink. Anybody get thirstier here when you drink? Anybody concerned with the next drink before you finish the first drink? Anybody care after the 3rd drink? Who cares if you go back to work or not? Anybody like that here? Anybody have enough to drink and then end up with the neighbor's partner by mistake? Sorry, we won't go there. Put your hands down. We do horrific. Anybody do horrific things here while drinking? Absurd, like driving, like I talked about yesterday. I'm driving through a spot check with a 26er between my legs, having a God moment, right? Like, we find God in those situations. Anybody find God at different times in their sobriety? I mean, in their alcoholism? Like, you can't remember. I like that one. I like when people try to remind you of stuff you did. I don't want to know, right? Anybody ever come to out of a blackout, having people explain to you what you just did? And you're saying, hey, I just got here myself, pal. I don't know what's going on. So the allergy, if you can't control the amounts of drink, most newcomers are under the impression they're here because of the consequences. I'm not here because of my drinking. I'm here because of the consequences. Anybody? Then you find out the reason I have consequences is because I have this allergy to alcohol. If I can't control the amounts I drink, can I control the outcome? So I'm always going to have consequences. If I can control the amount I drink, can I control the outcome? Yes. So that's what makes me different than other people. There's always going to be consequences associated with my drinking. Why? Because I can't control the amounts I drink. I'm different than normal people. What that looks like is my wife's a normal drinker. She's a heavy drinker, but she's normal. I don't understand the way she drinks. And we're the only group of people that make fun of normal drinkers. It'll tell you what that's all about, right? Like, she does stuff that's just, I don't understand. because once I understand the allergy, it makes good sense why I drank the way I did. Anybody last call? Trying to get all the beer that they've come out of the bar? Any women with the big purses? Clink, clink, clink. And you think everybody's sneaking the stuff out of the bar, right? Anybody have the nice leather coats and the bubbling out and staggering and shh, I don't know. And then you get sober and you realize there's only a couple of us at that state. They just don't want to deal with the hassle. Let them steal the 4 beers. Let them have it. Anyways. When I have a drink, I want another one. I never understood that. So looking back over my drinking history, when they explained that to me after 11 years in and out, it made good sense why I was different than other people. I'm getting ready to go to the bar for a band on a Friday night. The band's starting at 10:30. Happy hours at 5:30. What time do you think I'm at the bar at? 4:30. I like the way some of you think. Keep an eye on that table. So what happens is I'm getting happy, right? I met this one girl. God bless her. I made amends to her. She was church going, sober. I thought she could keep me sober. My partner, she doesn't drink, do nothing. She met me one of those intervals in the fellowship when I was sober for a little while, and I put on the shine like, oh, life's fantastic inside, just like, yeah. So I meet her, I get happy for a while because she's changing my life, she's changing the way I feel, life's looking good, and relapsing. She got introduced to the other me, which was a total change, so I bring her to the bar, happy hour. I have 3 beers down, and I got a couple shooters coming, and some more is coming. They have all these fancy drinks, these shooters coming. I look over, she's halfway done her beer. I'm saying, come on, it's happy hour. Get happy. So she finishes that beer, order another beer. Now I probably got 5 beers down, a couple shots. I look over, she's halfway through the next beer, and I look over, and she goes, I'm not feeling well. I want to go home. I'm walking her home, giving her crap about her drinking. There's something seriously wrong with you. I don't think this is going to work. I thought she was the one with the problem. I was the one having a normal reaction. I'm getting in control. Let's get up. Let's do something. Feeling like, yoo-hoo. Probably nobody like that here, right? She's getting an out of control, nauseating feeling because she's drinking a toxin that's poisoning her system, and she's saying enough. And if she had another one, her system would start rejecting it, and she would start vomiting. I'm not having that feeling. And as the years went on, I consumed more and everything became around. Why is that? Because of the allergy. I just knew intuitively how much I needed to drink. Normal people don't consume that. Why is that? Because of the allergy. So we'll kind of move on. The second thing he talks about, he says, to us, our alcoholics' lives seem the only normal one. We're irritable, restless, and discontent. Anybody need that explained? And we need a sense of ease that comes by what? By taking a few drinks. We need to... Anybody understand that? The promises come true. I don't care who you are, man. If you take a couple drinks, all the promises come true. You don't care. You intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle you. You don't regret the past. You don't shut the door on. You see how your experience can benefit everybody around you if they want to listen, right? Anybody? But then what happens, you can't stay there. Why can't you stay there? It's because of the allergy. You move past the point of comfortability. You need more. Anybody? Anybody your brain's talking to you? You need to go home. You need to pay rent. You need to do this. Anybody? And your body's saying you ain't going nowhere. And then you just stay in the moment. And the next thing you come to in the morning with a firm resolution not to do that again. Anybody firm resolutions here? I'm never doing that again. And this is before coming to AA. And then you find yourself drinking again. So the first symptom in alcoholism is the allergy. What's the second symptom? How many people say the obsession? How many people not participating? How many people want a hint? So the doctor, as he goes through here, he talks about this is repeated over and over. Unless these people can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of their recovery, right? So we're going to kind of look at the second symptom. We understand the first symptom. Everybody good? It's the allergy. So that means when we talk about it, we have a common understanding of what the first symptom is. We could all agree on it. That's what they call the allergy. That means when somebody, why do I drink? The allergy. What does that mean? Then we explain it. I can't stop when I start. I can't control the amounts. That makes sense. My life becomes totally unmanageable when drinking and not drinking. Alcohol is controlling my life. So the second symptom is on page 23. The doctor talks about it. He starts the conversation off light, because if he started, in the doctor's opinion, saying, well, you suffer from a mental illness and that only a spiritual experience will conquer, how many people would have threw away the book? So he's saying, we're going to start off light. He says something happens in the mind that they return to this thing, unless they have an entire psychic change. They change the language where it's palatable. And it's kind of like, okay, I could keep reading. I'm not too offended. And then he gives two examples of people who were afflicted with this illness. Both of them became sold on the ideas contained in this book, and both recovered. And so we get into Bill's story. What's the purpose of Bill's story? Is to give an example of what alcoholism looks like on a full scope. So what I get to see what he was like, not what it was like. We change things. We see what he was like, what happened, and what he was like afterwards. The what happened part is the course of action he took for the third time in treatment. The third time, one of our founders, the third time in treatment. He got taken through a course of action by Abby, who showed up at his place while Bill was dying of alcoholism, carried a message to him, explained it in such a way that it made sense, and he said to Bill, why don't you choose your own conception of what I'm talking about? So it wasn't God as he understood him. It was the conception he was able to formulate based on what Abby was saying. First, Abby explained the solution. Then he said, choose your own conception that you're comfortable with. And he said it was only a matter of being willing to do what I did, my friend, to believe that there is a power greater. Nothing more was required to build what I saw, my friend, what I haven't. As he sat at the kitchen table drinking, he did steps 1, 2, and 3. Drinking, because he was educated on what the problem was now, what the solution is, and the course of action he needed to take. So there was no big catastrophe happening in his life. He was presented truth. And he made that idea, being convinced that any life, he knew that to continue on would mean death. He was not offered a solution before, and he seen it was obtainable by doing what his friend did. And then he was shortly afterwards, he went to the hospital and he was separated from alcohol for the last time. That was his third time in treatment. Went through the course of action. His friend promised when these things were done, he would enter a way of living that answered all his problems, not before they were done. Because when you understand this, we'll look at pace. So we see what alcoholism looks like, and it kind of, if you get to, there is a solution in your book, and it tells you what the previous chapter was for. There's something really weird about this book. It'll tell you what you're about to read, what you are reading, and why you read it. It'll tell you what the problem is, what the problem looks like, and what the solution looks like, and when you're there. So when you finish this thing, there is a solution. It goes, we of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is page 17. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who are just as much as hopeless as Bill. Did you get to see the hopelessness of his situation? Because Bill thought he had what it took. He thought, based on how he was feeling and thinking, not wanting to drink, that he would never drink again. How many people felt that way? I'm never going to, and he drank again. He even said, I could laugh at the gin mills. Right? Surely this was the answer. So no, this guy, 5 years trying to get sober. If you're new in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and struggling, that's what we do without a solution. We continue to drink. Just because you're here doesn't mean you're not going to drink. This is not an alcoholism-free zone. Alcoholics Anonymous is designed for relapsers. It's not designed for people who can stay sober. We're the only group of people surprised that people relapse in AA, really. I can't believe that person's drinking again, really. And now I hear people say, well, if I drank again, I would never come back here. Well, where are you going to go? Burger King? I mean, it's designed for relapsers. It's designed for people who can't stay sober. That's why we offer solution when put into application can do the impossible. Was Bill able to stay sober based on 2 times in treatment? No. Was he willing to do anything it took to change his life? Yes. What kept him sober for a bit on the second time leaving treatment was fear. And then he knew why he drank again, was the insidious insanity returned. right? He knew where he got that symptom was from meeting with the doctor. He thought his education and his experience with alcoholism would save him from drinking. That's why we don't really comprehend. So when we go to the second symptom in alcoholism, by the time they get us going into this thing on page 23, and this is the least understood and talked about symptom in our fellowship. And it's the pivoting point to this whole thing. The whole thing's built on this thing in regards to alcoholism, but it's the least talked about because we don't like the truth of it. It makes us uncomfortable. It makes us beyond human aid. It makes us realize that I'm dealing with a fatal illness, and I don't like that thought. And it covers that on this page also, is on page 23. They talk about here, in regards to the allergy. Everybody, how many people are still here? One person, that's good. How many people are really thinking and arguing a bit with me? We're talking about the book here. So page 22, they talk about the allergy. They talk about if this person never took a drink again, they wouldn't set in motion the terrible cycle, right? So they reconfirmed, as long as I don't take the first one, I'll be okay. So we hear that in the fellowship. Don't take the first one, you don't have to. Awesome. That is not step one. Because if you're able to keep yourself sober based on that knowledge, then you're not a real alcoholic. A real alcoholic can't keep themselves sober based on self-knowledge. If we can keep ourselves sober based on self-knowledge, step one would say, have you learned your lesson? Step two would say, just don't do that anymore. Step three would say, refer back to step one again. That's the way we make it sound in here, because you hear new people going, as long as I don't drink, I'll be okay. You're in trouble now sober. You're in deep crap. You're the only one that don't realize, because you're like whistling in there. I'm okay, look, I'm sober. You feel good about yourself. Oh, I feel so good, I just did step one. You didn't do our step one. Making friends again. Okay. I told you it's going to be one of those meetings. Here, real fast. If you got your book, bottom of 22. He says, we are equally positive that once he takes alcohol or whatever into his system, something happens both in the body and the mind, mental sense, what makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. Why is it virtually impossible for these people to stop once they start? Because of the allergy. It's okay. It's part of the education thing here, right? It's like learning to formulate our ideas based back on this, and it makes sense, right? So then they talk about the experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. Anybody want to take a survey on that? True or false? Who can safely drink here? 2 Al-Anons, right? How many people can safely drink here? How many people cannot safely drink here? Why? Because of the allergy. So that should be enough to keep you sober knowing that, right? Well, damn. How many people are hoping that? Oh yeah, just don't do it. I like that regard. Just don't do it. Put the plug in the jug. Go to meetings. Okay, sorry. I have these squirrel moments, okay? Remember, 11 years in and out. 11 years. I had a guy talk me into joining the Army once to find solution to alcoholism because I lacked discipline. That's a totally different story. Oh my God. That guy was me, by the way. I had a moment with myself. Self, what do you think? Well, you know what? It seems you can't get sober, and these people say you lack discipline. If you had discipline based on your life, well, yeah, it makes sense. Where would a guy get disciplined? I joined the Army. Anyways, left there with a bleeding ulcer. Okay, so they talk about, so if I don't take the first drink, I won't trigger the allergy. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. True? Right? Therefore, thereby setting a terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. So now they're changing the conversation from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body to the mind part. They're going to start diagnosing that and what that looks like. And what we don't like this page. So we avoid it. Right? And so what they talk about as they go, so the new conversation would they be talking about the allergy part or this problem that centers in the mind? Right? Because we already agreed, if I never took a drink, I'd never trigger the allergy. So that means there's something else happening that I keep on drinking. That's why the doctor talks about his observation. These people keep on drinking. In spite of everything happens. So this is repeated over and over. What does that mean, over and over? And does it say till they learned their lesson? Till they hit bottom? Till they have the gift of desperation? Till they surrender? Till they have acceptance? If those conditions were, he would have said that. Until an entire psychic change occurs, there's very little hope of these people's recovery. They feel good about the recovery, then something happens. And they explain that. When you understand that something happens, then it makes good sense why I need to do this course of action, and why the new people coming here looking for an answer to their problem, or why the people you may be dealing with can't stay sober. You'll know why now. And you'll be able to better educate them on what they need to do to find an answer to their problem. Remember, the people who really care the most is the family, the friends, the daughters, the brothers, the sisters that know that this person's coming to AA, that they may find an answer, that they may get their relative, their kid, their family back. Right? Because they didn't lose them, right? They lost the person who's afflicted with alcoholism. They're still living their life, right? What happens is they lose us to the illness. And so when they come here, they're looking for a solution. So they talk about here, as they go through here, and I'll do this real fast. They talk about once in a while may tell the truth. So they're kind of saying they don't know why they keep drinking here. And see halfway down? So once in a while may tell the truth. Strange to say is that they usually don't know why they took the first drink. Some drinkers have excuses which they are satisfied. What that means is it looks like this. How many people's relapsed here? One person. No, really. How many people? How about before you come to AA? See, a lot of people don't understand alcoholism because you have relapsed. Just because you came here and if you've abstained, if you didn't relapse, you wouldn't have come to AA looking for a solution. So how many people's relapsed here? Okay, everybody's hands should go up, right? Because if you're able to stay sober, then you wouldn't come here, would you?
Yes.
If you're able to stay sober, you would come here?
I never relapsed. Does that mean I'm not a real alcoholic?
Okay, so from the first time you made a decision never to drink again, you were able to do that?
From when I came into AA.
That wasn't a question. See, you got to listen to the whole question. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was hoping that was the one I'd be able to jump all over you with. Remember what the Al-Anon lady said, oh, there's three here. I don't want to explain it 3 times, right? So, let me finish the idea here. So, if we were able to stay sober, would we have come to AA? How many people remember the first time they made a decision not to drink? I was 15. I got sober when I was 27. I have 11 years of good enough reasons to come back to AA. 11 years. I can tell you some stories that any normal person would go, oh my God, I'm never drinking again. But I forget those things. So I keep on drinking. It's an act against my own will. I forget I'm not supposed to drink. Anybody like that here? So, I got to finish my thought here. Go ahead.
For the purpose of your discussion on this point, is there a difference between deciding I'm never going to drink again and deciding I'm going to drink, but I better do it smarter, better, more controlled, more moderate?
Well, that's what I love about the book. It answers itself, right? So, the question was here that these people don't want to drink because they agreed that once they drink, it causes problems. Then they drink again. So now they're going to give an excuse why they drank again. Anybody remember making promises to people you're never going to drink again? And would you have passed the lie detector's test? Oh, yeah. And then you drank again, and now you got to come up with an excuse why you drank. Or punish them where they never mention it to you again that you're drinking. Anybody good at punishing people? What we're really good at is somebody address us with something we did, we get them apologizing to us for what we did to them. Sorry for mentioning it. Okay, so once in a while may tell the truth. And strange to say is usually has no more idea why you took the first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really don't know why they do it. Anybody baffled here? Why do I keep doing that? I can't believe I caused that much pain. The sorrow, the agony.
When never.
Yeah. So they talk about here why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they're a baffled lot. So they just gave the symptom to the second. They just gave a title or a label to the second symptom. What is that? Malady. What's the malady? Sickness. Sickness. A sickness that centers where? In the mind. It's not in the parking lot. You see how we do this? We separate ourselves from the illness because if it's in the parking lot, just stay out of the parking lot. But if it's in your mind, now you're in trouble. right? So what they're talking about here, they're saying this malady. So they say, let us explain it. And as they go through here, they talk about once this malady has a rear hold, they're a baffled lot. Why are they baffled? Because they can't stay sober. How many people have been baffled here that you went back to the trough? How many people's relapsed here before coming to AA? Anybody kind of amazed that you went back drinking after everything you did? Anybody just start looking at you like, what the hell's the matter with you? I don't know. And then you try to explain them what's the matter with them. They say, you sound like a crazy person. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't know why I'm doing this stuff. When you look at anybody ever look in the mirror and go, what are you doing? I don't know. Anybody ever ask that part inside of you, what's the matter with you? And you start talking to it. Remember I was talking about that? You're alone and wherever. It's like, what's the matter with you? I don't know, man. I can't believe you're such a blank. You start abusing yourself. Anybody at that place? Like you're having a full-on conversation with you and it's not pretty. I'm the only one? Baffled. Why are you baffled? Because you keep doing an act against your own will. So they talk about here, as they go through this, and then they talk about there's the obsession that somehow someday they'll beat the game. But they often suspect they are down for the count. The first obsession they talk about in our literature is in regards to what? See, that's what we go to. But you got to look at what it's being used in. We already agreed if I never took the first drink, I'd never trigger the allergy. So the beat the game is that I can keep myself sober based on my own experience. That's why they're baffled. They're unable to do that. So they're exerting themselves even more. Look at any new guy. How many people are going to keep themselves sober here? Obsessed with the idea of keeping you sober. Look, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And then you drink again. What's our first obsession?
We want to drink, like, not get in trouble.
No, it has nothing to do with drinking anymore. No, because we already agreed, right? Is if I don't take, that's why page 22 says, if I never took the first drink, I never trigger the allergy. So that's not the problem anymore. They say the main problem in the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than in the body. They're talking about this conversation here. Why do you keep on doing something? Why are you baffled? Once this malady has a root hold, they're baffled on. But there's the obsession that I can keep myself sober based on me. And this is everything I'm doing to keep me sober. So what's our first obsession? It's our favorite topic.
The obsession of self.
Self! Us! I'm obsessed with me. Anybody obsessed with themselves here? I've been to some of your meetings. I've heard you share. Enough about me. What do you think of me? From the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, who are you thinking about? And then anybody remember when they're new? How they're going to fix you with you? Listen to any newcomer coming back. They start telling you what they're going to do to stay sober this time. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Most newcomers go, holy shit, I don't know what to do. How do I get sober? Because the mind's obsessed with the idea. And then it kind of confirms that, right? They talk about beat the game, but they suspect they're down for the count. Why? Because they keep relapsing. Remember Bill? No words can tell the loneliness, despair. Right, the second time in treatment, he was baffled. He was obsessed with this. Surely this is the self, like all that stuff. So you see that in here. He said, the tragic truth, if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day will not arrive. What happy day? Them being able to keep themselves sober. You got to follow the conversation here, right? Because they started a new conversation. They confirm it on the next page. They talk about at a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop is of absolutely no avail. Anybody have anybody ever have that? They talk about here that desire to stop. Anybody ever have the desire to stop but kept drinking? To stay stopped means stop. That means don't go back to it. They know that when I drink, something's different about me. If I don't drink, I'll be okay. Anybody? So they started, the most powerful desire to stop is not enough. I keep drinking. That's the second symptom of alcoholism, is the malady that centers in my mind and I can't see, feel, and touch it. Something happens. So they explained it here by saying, for reasons, they talk about this tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it's suspected. Every single case of those who are afflicted with alcoholism, it's been present long before we suspected it. What has been present long before we suspected it? The malady. They're still talking about the malady. Because you could have the allergy, given good reasons. Young people and people who've felt the nip of the ringer can't stay stopped. They give you an example of that guy. Took out the carpet slippers, 30 years. Right? He knew he had a problem when drinking, but he didn't have, his brain wasn't damaged to the state ours were, where the fact was, so he made a conscious decision to stop. And there are people in AA like that. That's why they said this symptom is necessary to have the psychic change or spiritual experience. But what happened is that guy's thinking ended up killing him in the long run. He made it 30 years. In a short time, he was dead from alcoholism. That's why it's very important to be educated on this stuff. So let's see how they confirm this thing. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We're without defense against the first drink. So do I have a choice whether I drink or not if I'm alcoholic? Just because I'm able to say 4 times in a week, does that mean I now have a choice? So does that choice ever come back again? I'm 30 years sober and I still don't have a choice. Right? For me to drink is to die because of the allergy. Right? What keeps me sober is the course of action that I've been through that created a psychic change of spiritual experience. What I have now is a daily reprieve contingent on these things. When I stop doing these things, what returns? Not the craving, the insanity. Because the only way to have a craving for alcohol is to drink it.
The malady.
Yeah, the malady returns. Alcoholism returns. That's why they talk about when we get into this thing. I'm just getting fired up. Anybody want a smoke break for 5 minutes or keep going? Sure. Anybody still in addiction want a smoke break or keep going? How many people want to keep going? Okay, we'll keep going because I'm getting fired up now. Okay. So if I have this illness, that's what the rest of the book starts mentioning on. So when you get to more about alcoholism, what's more about alcoholism talking about? So we just finished There Is a Solution. They talked about the solution, the fellowship of AA. They got into this conversation. They're bringing us up to the point now that about the second phase of our illness. They've explained the problem, right? They've given you examples of that. So what's more about alcoholism about? The chapter More About Alcoholism. What's the chapter More About Alcoholism about? More about, oh my God, here, everybody give each other a high five. Okay, it's about more about alcoholism. Okay, is it getting hot in here? What? So, it's about more about alcoholism. In order to talk more about alcoholism, that means they've already explained what alcoholism is. So write down how many symptoms there are on alcoholism. Write down how many symptoms you have in regards to alcoholism. You have 3? How many people got 3? How many people got 2? How many people not participating? 2 symptoms. 2 symptoms in alcoholism, mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main part. From what? From a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Right? If there was 3 symptoms, which gets confusing because they talk about that later. We use spiritual principles in order to recover from this illness, but I became spiritually sick as the result of the illness. I wasn't spiritually sick first and then became alcoholic. A lot of people get that confused. Right? What makes me alcoholic? The only one symptom that makes me alcoholic is what?
The malady.
Allergy. What makes me beyond human aid is the malady. So now it explains what they mean by beyond human aid and what makes these people and me powerless over alcohol. Right? Now I see what makes me an alcoholic and beyond human aid. So more about alcoholism would talk about those 2 symptoms. Right? And they start the page off by most of us had been unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. No person likes to think he's bodily and mentally different than their fellows. Right? Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. To prove we could drink like other people. Have these people done step one yet?
No.
Are they even totally aware that they have a problem?
No.
Right? The consequences haven't got severe enough that they are seeking help. Most of us are all here because of the consequences associated with alcoholism, not alcoholism. Anybody, how many people came here because they drank too much? How many people came here because they had problems when drinking? It's my problems when drinking. If I could just stop ending up with the neighbor's wife. I'm the only one here? How many people's hit on their cousin? Sorry, I'll move on. Okay. My third meeting, couldn't help it. Okay, so. No person like the bodily men. So they spend from page 30 to 33 talking about the allergy, part of our illness. And they explain it in great detail. So they talk about here about this guy planning to stop. There must be no reservations of any kind, no lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol. Page 33. That deals with the physical part. I conceded to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic. So let's back up to the second obsession and what's in regard to. So we change words, right? And we kind of, if you understand what they're talking about, then it makes good sense at different times in your your recovery or through other people's struggles. So they talk about here on page 30, they talk about the idea that somehow, someday, will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Is it the great obsession of every alcoholic?
Yeah.
The great obsession of every abnormal drinker. They haven't done step one yet. So once they do step one, what are you admitting to? That I can't safely drink. I concede to. That's what they talk about here, right? So if I'm still obsessing about drinking, have I done step one?
No, because you haven't understood the allergy.
That's right. So, and they confirm that here. Because the obsession is in association with what? Somehow, someday I could get away with it.
Cunning, bathing, and power.
That's the insanity. So what they talk about here is my understanding of the physical part of my illness. The obsessions in regards to that somehow, someday I could control and enjoy my drinking. Have I done step one yet? No. Has this person done step one? Anybody with the idea that somehow, someday can control and enjoy their drinking, have they done step one yet? So will they seek a solution to a problem they don't really believe they have? So the book answers itself. Let's see what it says here, right? The great obsession, the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. There's a lot of people out there who are able to drink on a daily basis without consequences. If you were able to drink without consequence, how many people would be here right now? You wouldn't be here. Because what happens is there's some form of consequence that gets our attention to say there's something wrong. The people that love us, the people around us. I've met a lot of people over the years. They go to work, they go home, they drink, and their lives, and they drink alcoholically. They're maintenance drinkers. They just no need to come here, and they die years beforehand. Their liver fails. But here, let's get into this. Okay, we learned. Who learned?
We.
And us, them, the people who put the... And us, the reader. We learned that we fully had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. What are you conceding to? This proposition of what the illness is. They had to concede that they had this symptom. The physical part of the symptom. That makes them alcoholic. That they could safely never take a drink again. Once you concede that, you know that I can never safely drink. It doesn't mean you can not drink. So we get that kind of confused, right? Once I concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic, am I still going to have an obsession with alcohol?
Yes.
No.
No.
Because when I want to drink, I'll be able to tell myself the truth. I can't drink. I love pistachios. I've eaten them all my life, right? It's not the first time that I ate them is the problem. It's the first time I started having an allergic reaction to them without knowing it. This is not the first time. Somewhere along the line, I started having an allergic reaction. I was unaware of it until I had a severe reaction. So as the years went on, that throat and the symptoms, I kind of, oh, wow. And then the last time I ate them, I ended up in the hospital. Nearly closed my throat. they explained to me that I'm allergic to these pistachios. I can never eat them again because of the physical factor that happens to me when eating them. So, does that make sense? I can never safely eat them whatsoever. It smashed any idea of ever eating them again. No matter how much I like them, even the effect produced by them. Every once in a while closes my throat. I like the effect produced by them, but that's a totally different fellowship. So what happens is, so based on truth, I was able not to eat them again, regardless of how much I enjoyed them. When I went by the supermarket, I would see them and I'd go, wow, it would be nice. I don't know, you can talk to my wife, but she started buying them after. Anyways, that's a totally different story. I got a bag of pistachios. I know exactly where they are, and same with our bar. I know exactly what's in it, right? I'm drawn to whatever reason. So, as long as I don't eat them, I never have to worry about the allergic reaction. So, I went to Montreal, and it's been 3 months since I ate them. And they're on the street, and they're heating them up, and they smell good, and I walked by and I thought, wow, it'd be nice to have a bag of those. And my mind says, yeah, I bought a bag. And my mind says, because it doesn't have the red dye on them. That's what made me sick the last time. I ate the bag. I ended up in hospital. They sent my file from BC to Montreal. They said, weren't you in the hospital 3 months ago for this? Didn't they tell you not to eat this? Because you're I said, yeah, I thought the dye on them was what caused it. And so I'm never going to eat it again. I've learned my lesson. I'm never doing this again. So I ended up, 6 months later, I ended up in Belize. I was looking at a project there for one of my clients. And I'm walking, it's hot. I don't know if you've ever been to Belize, but it's hot. And there's this ice cream shop, and they had all these trophies and stuff for their ice cream. And I said, what did you get all those trophies for? They said, our pistachio ice cream. It's the best in the world. And we have a sale today. 2 scoops for the price of 1. I said, wow, I've never had pistachio ice cream. And it was those peanuts from Montreal. They were from Brazil. These are from Africa. Totally different species of peanuts. I said, I'll have 2 scoops. I ate the scoops. Ended up in the hospital. And they came walking up on my file again. Looking over the guy, they said, this is your 3rd trip here, eh? Yeah. We told you the last 2 times that it's severe. You have a severe problem with this. You can't afford. Yeah. So we have somebody we'd like you to talk to. Who am I talking to? A dietitian or a psychiatrist? Psychiatrist, because there's something the matter with me fundamentally in my brain. It's secondary that I'm allergic to it. Now we all on the same page? I already know I can't eat them. I concede here that I can't eat them because I have allergic reactions. So now if anybody asks me if I want to drink after I do step 1, the answer is no, because I'm allergic to it. I understand why this thing happens. I could tell myself the truth and smash the idea. So where does it say that? I don't know. Let's see what the book says. We learned that we fully had to consider in ourselves that we're alcoholics. This is the first step in the recovery. The delusion that we are like other people are presently has to be smashed. Who does the smashing? We do, based on truth. Do I need the psychic change of the spiritual experience to come to that truth? No. Because if I did, I would be dead. Because it took that realization to get me through the rest of the steps. That's why I do all this stuff. That's why I keep relapsing. Man, that's why the phenomenon of craving happens. It makes good sense. And that's why I did all those horrific things while drinking. That's why my progression kept on happening to having drinks in the morning and drink. That makes good sense now why I can't safely drink alcohol in any form whatsoever. Because when I put it in my system, it triggers the phenomenon of craving, and my brain starts talking to my body, and it doesn't matter. My body always wins out. And then after a couple more drinks, I don't even think about anything anymore. Anybody have that kind of drinking here? The band's going, life's going. Bill talked about that. The world went to crap in a handbasket. Friends were jumping from high places. What did he do? Wobbled back to the bar. He went to the refuge of the drink. And now, right? Anybody watch their life go away sitting in a bar, sitting with a bottle? You said, I lost everything. No, you didn't lose nothing. You watched it go away. And the reason you couldn't stop it is because you're afflicted with alcoholism. Right? So page 33. Did you want to ask a question over there? Or? Earlier? Okay, so page 33. And this is the second least understood, goes back is the least understood symptom in our fellowship, because we don't like the idea that we're beyond human aid. We don't like the idea we suffer from a mental illness. We don't like the idea that I'm going to relapse again left to my own devices. We don't like the idea the promise of step one is relapse. That's the step one promise, and it never changes. It stays the same. It's the only step that stays the same. There's people arguing with that idea now. If it changed in step one, then we wouldn't need the rest of the steps. That's alcoholism. Alcoholism is, these are the symptoms of alcoholism. So they talk about from page 33 to 43, 11 pages. They spend 11 pages in our basic text after the doctor's basic explanation of this thing, explaining the second symptom in alcoholism. And it's not the obsession. The obsession is in regards to the idea that somehow, someday I could safely drink. We like the idea of the obsession because that means I'm not beyond human aid. I could smash the idea of the obsession. But if I have this malady, now I'm in trouble. That's why they talk about here. It talks about here when they kind of go through this on page 35. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. And on page 34, they talked about for those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends on the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. So that symptom was long present before I described it. So that means I did not create alcoholism. Alcoholism created me. I'm a byproduct of alcoholism. I can't change the story. That's why I'm always in conflict with myself. Why is this always happening? I can't believe that because I'm afflicted with an illness, not a behavioral problem. I'm the result of step one. Step one's not the result of me. Step one has determined my life. That's what got me here. Under the lash of alcoholism, I'm driven to AA. And here I find the nature of my fatal illness. Here. Right? And so page 37, there's so much to get into this. And so in the worksheets kind of go real through this, but 37 explains this is the best explanation to the second symptom. And when you fully comprehend what it is and you're working with new people and they comprehend it, they will be propelled into the solution. They'll be motivated to do this thing. If you've said you've done step one and your ass isn't on fire to get through the rest of the steps, you have not done step one. When you've done step one, you realize what you're up against, and the only thing that's going to save you from the fate that awaits you is the solution that we're offering, saying that doesn't have to be your story anymore. We got a new story for you. Came to believe that a power grants us can restore us to sanity, remove this thing in your brain that's killing you, that you can't see, feel, and touch. You cannot see, feel, and touch the problem. Because if you could see, feel, and touch the problem, then you could fix it. We're obsessed with the idea of us fixing it. We changed the message of AA. The only person dying of alcoholism in AA is the alcoholic. We look at them, why can't you get sober? Well, maybe I suffer from alcoholism. I don't know, kind of weird. Okay, sorry. Anyways, just hang on to the ginger ale all night. Okay. So anyway, page 37. So they talk about this guy relapsing, and it says, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Remember, they're going to give us examples of what they mean by this problem that centers in the mind. They talk about how can such a lack of proposal and ability to think straight be called anything else. You may think this is an extreme case. To us, is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. Not some of us, every single one of us. Right? And they talk about, as they went down here, they talk about we have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomena that paralleled with our sound reasoning that there invariably ran some insane trivial excuse for taking the first drink. What's a phenomena? Unexplainable event. They describe the second symptom that happens to people like us as an unexplainable event. How do you explain an unexplainable event that we suffer from? They say, we're going to give you pictures of what it looks like. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind, it might be good to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk. Suddenly, as I crossed the threshold to the bar, I thought it may be great to have a couple highballers. That's it. those examples happen over and over and over, and where they kind of really reiterate that, and they talk about page 42, that you can get into it later. Most people who come into the fellowship don't understand the problem of alcoholism. What time do I go to? 3? Oh, 3:30. Yeah, baby. Okay. 30 years. I still get more fired up with this as time goes on. This stuff saved my life, right? And countless other people. So they talk about here, this guy comes into the fellowship. Back then, let's kind of look at that. He's talking to some members of AA. They're trying to tell him this problem. They're trying to explain the second symptom of what an alcoholic mind is. The second symptom is association to somebody who has an alcoholic mind. Not everybody who comes to the fellowship has an alcoholic mind. Some people are problem drinkers, given good reason, could stop or quit or modify. I've met a lot of people like that. But the alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be able to stop drinking based on their own solution or their own story or their own consequences. Because there's this thing that happens in their mind where they can't see the danger in what they're about to do. So this guy says, like Bill says, I have the answer now, self-knowledge. There's no way I'm going to do it again. Right? I have such a profound inner workings of mind. The knowledge of my mind, relapse is unthinkable. If you're thinking that already, you've already talked yourself out of doing the steps. So this guy here is one of those guys on page 42. And he talks about here, 2 members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned. This guy relapsed again. Because earlier, when you read it on your own, he talks about here, I'm going to back up on page 41. He talks about here, as soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over the event in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I made no fight whatsoever against the first drink. This time I had not even thought of the consequences at all. The blind spot, the phenomenon, this thing that just happens in our mind that parallels with our sound thinking. It's like a hostile takeover that we can't see it. It makes sense of what we're doing. That's why we question ourselves after we do it and not beforehand. And if we question ourselves, it'll be hazy or not, who cares? Somebody just talked about yesterday about somebody relapsing after 20 years, 35 years, 40 years. You think they're making a conscious decision to drink? The insanity returns. Alcoholism returns. That's why we have a daily reprieve contingent on a certain recipe. Stop the recipe, change the outcome. Part of that recipe is our circle. It's not the triangle. We change things here. It's the circle that keeps us all united based on this power that's available to us. That's the squirrel moment, backing up. Okay. No fight whatsoever. This time, not even thought of the consequence. I had commenced to drink carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remember the conversation we're having now, somebody had with him. Right? Somebody had this conversation with him that we're having now. Exact same conversation because we're taking it out of our basic text. Right? I now remember what my alcoholic friend had told me. They had prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, what's that? The malady, the sickness that centers in my mind that exhibits itself in a drink, alcoholism. The time and place would come where I would drink again. They had said that though I had raised the defense, it would one day give way before some trivial excuse for having a drink. Well, just that happened and more. For what I had learned about alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment on I had an alcoholic mind. So if you have an alcoholic mind, what step is that? 1. What's the promise then? If you have an alcoholic mind, you're going to do it again. That's step 1 promise. It never changes. So that's why they're giving you an alternative step, which is 2, which is the solution to 1. Right? And when I go through this course of action, here comes another question. When I go through this course of action, I've had the psychic change or spiritual experience. How many people are here right now? 2. That's good. So how many people are really thinking and arguing a bit? How many people not even here? Okay. So I go through this course of action. I've had the psychic change or spiritual experience. Write down the first question that comes to mind. Write the first question that comes to mind after I ask this question. So, I finished the steps. The process. I've had a psychic change and spiritual experience. Do I still, or the person who's had the psychic change or spiritual experience, still have an alcoholic mind? Yes or no? Write down your answer. Yes or no?
Can I drink again? I like your...
So, step 1, I'm dying from an illness. has two symptoms involved, right? Physical allergy. If I don't drink, I never trigger it. But my mind keeps returning to it because I have a malady, a sickness in my mind. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore sanity. That takes place where? In the mind as a result of the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. They talk about this change that happens, which is also a phenomena. This unexplainable event that happens to us. His doctor explains it in the book. He says, to me, these occurrences are phenomena. But they've been happening since the beginning of time for people like you. You're beyond my human aid. It's in here. It's pretty well. He admits that people like you are too heartbreaking. Most of you are doomed to death. But we don't tell you that because there's no use in telling you you're going to die an alcoholic death. Because we don't offer you a solution. But he says every once in a while, since the beginning of time, these people have obtained or experienced a psychic change or spiritual experience that creates a shift in their whole reality that enables them to recover from the illness that's killing them. So, when I go through this, and I've had this change that they talk about in the spiritual appendix in the back of the book, do I still have an alcoholic mind, yes or no? How many people say yes? How many people say no? The no's have it. Because if I have an alcoholic mind, what am I going to do? I'm going to drink. An alcoholic mind. He talked about that. The reason he drank again because he had an alcoholic mind. In order to be free from that, he needs to go through a course of action that creates a psychic change or spiritual experience. Doesn't mean he's not alcoholic anymore. Anybody want some proof backing that statement up? Good. Page 85. Let's go over there. We're going to have some fun. You guys have been here a while. Let's really get this puppy going. Page 85. So, here's the other thing, since before we get here, is we've started changing the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. We started making it about the steps. It's never been about the steps. It's never been about the steps. People get up and talk about the steps. It's not about the steps. When you go to the bar and you take a drink, is it the drink or the effect produced by the drink? The effect. We drink for the effect, the outcome of taking that drink. The purpose of the steps is the outcome, is the vehicle. It's not the miracle. As weird as it may say, the reason for me going through this is the effect it produces. Once I have the effect, I don't need to do the steps anymore. I do the principles that keep me connected. If you understand the way the big book's put together, it's only designed that you're able to go through the steps once. And then you practice these principles and you maintain them by helping other people go through it. The purpose of the steps is to get you connected to a power greater than yourself. That's the whole purpose of this book. Once you're connected, it's about maintaining it. So through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact. Once you have this connection, it creates the change. Once I have the change, I need to maintain it by having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, not a result. We've changed things. Most people start saying a result. That's giving you the impression there's more than one result for doing the steps. There's only one purpose for doing the steps to create this psychic change or spiritual experience if you're alcoholic. Because if you don't have this change, what's your fate? You're going to drink again. How long it takes for you to die is secondary. But first you die a spiritual death. But you die, something changes inside where your alcoholic life's in the normal one. Anybody ever relapse here and stop coming to AA for a while? It's like you've never been in AA. You ever notice that? And then it takes a whole bunch of consequences to get you to remember us again. Right? So, it's about carry this message and to practice these principles in all of my affairs. I've gotten married once to my wife. I practice certain principles that keep me married to her. But beforehand, I had to go through the whole procedure. I met her. We talked, and I thought, wow, this would be really good to enhance my life. She's the partner I've been looking for my entire life. We got engaged. So steps 1, 2, and 3 is the dating. It could change at any time, and you'd be totally unaware of it. Nothing really happens in 1, 2, and 3, and it changes. You ever get a phone call? Doesn't look like it's working anymore, which means relapse. Right? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is the engagement. It's a little more serious. 9, 10, 11, and 12 is the marriage. It's a way of life now, right? Most people don't get that far because they like the dating. Anyways, you kind of catch why I get married. See you tomorrow. Okay, sorry. Okay, so getting back about the alcoholic mind. So they talk about here, and we have on page 84, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time, what's that big word? Sanity will have returned. We'll seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it like a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. And we find that this has happened automatically. Right? We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, nor are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It doesn't exist. Right? It doesn't exist for us. We are neither cocky nor afraid. This is how our experience, this is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And then they go into the recipe of saying, hey, but we like to rest on our laurels. What does laurels mean? What's the definition? Yeah, it's kind of saying, I've achieved what I hope to achieve. I'm feeling good. I don't see the benefit of continuing or developing any further. I've got what I've got. I've gotten comfortable. This was the whole purpose of where I am. I don't need to move forward. So at the bottom of the page here, since we're here, the whole purpose of the steps is to get me to what? Well, it's kind of like that. So I'm going to kind of, I just want to hit these highlights, but I'm going to finish what I was talking about here on again, on page, where did I put it? 101 for some reason. Okay, my mind's still acting up, working. So if you go to 101, they confirm this about the alcoholic mind. They talk about we're supposed to avoid this, we're supposed to avoid bars, we're supposed to avoid all these things. If you're new, you should avoid all those things until you've had a psyche change or spiritual experience and your dependence is no longer on you, right? And you have good reason for these things. They talk about that on page 101. They talk about we meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind, right? There's something the matter with his spiritual condition. The only chance for sobriety would be to be placed on the Greenland camp, and they talk about even then somebody will show up with alcohol. So what it's saying is you're not keeping yourself sober. What it's saying is your relationship with something greater than you is keeping you sober. That's the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if we kind of go to the second half of what I want to do this, we looked at the problem. We're going to look at the solution and mainline some ideas. So if you've had some real difficulty on what I've talked about, the problem, book-based understanding of what the problem is, you're really going to have your twist when I talk about the solution here, okay? Never bite that guy back here again. You hear what that guy said? Okay, we agnostics. It's the book. Everything's in the book. Okay, so if you still have an alcoholic mind and believe that, it's fine. The book says you don't. So if I have an alcoholic mind, I'm going to what? Drink again. But I have a daily reprieve contingent on my relationship with what? Power greater than self. Where and how am I to find this power? That's what this book is about. Our more religious members call it a God consciousness, creative intelligence, whatever you want to call it. But the purpose is the experience of what they're talking about, getting access to this power, and the power is within. So if you go to We Agnostics, they talk about here, again, I'm going to ask you a really weird question. Anybody ready for another weird question? Okay, so we've come to this page. We're at page 44. I've done all the preceding pages, all of them. Right from the beginning where we talked about the story. I've read from there all the way through. I have a history, I have an idea. I've worked with some people, my sponsor taking me through this. I understand alcoholism now. I understand the solution that they're offering me. I understand why these people need to take this solution, where and how to find the solution, what the solution means, all from whose perspective? Whose understanding do I have now?
100 men and women.
Yeah, and since thousands, it's theirs. So steps 1 and 2 is whose understanding, mine or theirs? Is it as I understand it, or is it as they understand it? How many people say as we understand it? How many people say it's as they understand it? It's as they understand it. None of this is my idea. That's why I'm reading the book. I would have never came up with any of this. How many people would have came up with this? With their buddy in the bar. Hey, you realize I have this thing called the phenomenon of craving? Just came to me. Not only that, it seems like I have this malady centers in my mind. That only a spiritual experiencer will conquer it. I said, it's the damnedest thing. I was just sitting there thinking about what my problem was, and it came to me. They spend... Actually, they didn't. Actually, somebody gave him the information. All our information is given to us by other people who cared for us. All of it. None of it's ours. It's all outside in. It's all from those people that don't understand us. They're the only people that cared about us. We didn't give a shit. You ever notice that people were more concerned about your drinking than you are? How many people have been concerned about you long before you became concerned about you? And then when you became concerned about you, now we have a problem. Before that, So, question. They spend all this information to educate us what the problem and the solution is. It's not from my understanding. I would have never came up from this. It's their collective. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book or this text. So they're going to explain in great detail. But if you kind of go through this all the way through here, they talk about explaining this thing to inform and comfort those who may be afflicted. They even say further on is clear-cut direction showing how we have recovered. They talk about the next chapter explains alcoholism from our point of view. All of it's theirs. So what is the purpose to the book up to this point in time on page 44? Write down the question. So newcomers say, hey, what's the purpose of this book up to this point in time? You're on page 44. What's the purpose of this book to this point in time? What would you tell them?
Explain what alcoholism is.
Yeah, it says that right on the top of the page. Yeah, well, what is the top of the page? Remember, I told you the book will tell you what it's going to explain to you. They'll explain to you what they're trying to explain to you, and then they'll explain to you what they've been saying to you. They're funny. They know who their audience is. You ever kind of weird? They say, hey, once more. You notice how they finished more about alcoholism? Hey, just in case you missed it for the first... Look at this. On the next page. Funny as hell. Page 43. Once more. Hey, in case you missed it for the first 43 pages, the doctor's opinion and the introduction to this whole thing, we're going to tell you once more. They do that all the way through the book. It's kind of funny, eh? And even working with others, they remind you of things. So they talk about, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. Who did we learn this from? Them. So whose understanding do we have now? Theirs. So we're part of the collective. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AE. We all agree on what the problem is. We agreed based on their understanding. So there was over 100 of them when they put this together. They agreed on what the problem was, right? I've made a self-diagnosis. I agree to what they're telling me, and I concede to this proposition that I have this illness. Do I become a part of the collective now? Yes, so a sponsor's job is to guide you through this. Who's really sponsoring you is this text. This is our manual that we keep with us for the rest of our lives. It gets us back on spiritual, it gets us back to remembering things that we forget. Right? So they talk about, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. Have they done that? So now you should know what type of alcoholic you are if you've gone through this. Most people in the fellowship of AA don't know what type of alcoholic they are. I know what type of alcoholic I am now. They've made a clear distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic. Have they? Yes, no? So now I should be able to know what type of alcoholic I am, and they clarify it with the two questions again. If, when you honestly want to, you find you can't quit entirely, what symptom is that? How many people say the allergy? How many people say the malady? It's the malady. If you can't quit entirely. So remember, now they switched the answers around. Because if I never took a drink, I'd never trigger the allergy. So the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than in the body, right? So they talk about here. Or quit entirely. Or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, what symptom is that? The allergy. So there's only 2 symptoms. And then they talk about you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. That's it. 3 questions in step 1. 1, do I have the allergy? 2, do I have the malady? And 3, am I suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer? Or do I believe I'll be able to keep myself sober based on my own experience? And how long can I afford to have? So that's why they talk about, you ever notice, I don't know if you ever read the book, they talk about the experiment of quitting for a while. They said, try the experiment of quitting for a while. But we could render the reader even more, we'll explain alcoholism that way, because we know if you're alcoholic of this type, you won't be able to stay sober for a couple of years. We already know that. We already told you, we doubt you can stay sober. We give the people the impression because you're here you can stay sober. No, you can't. If you're alcoholic, you're not going to be okay. That's why we offer a solution. When you start telling alcoholics they'll be okay, they get relieved of the idea because they thought they were in deep shit before they got here. Anybody? When you're in deep trouble, you'll do anything. People tell you you're okay. Okay, I can relax. Wow, I thought that was close. I thought it was serious. Just go to meetings, you'll be okay. Anyways. So then they talk about lack of power is my dilemma. Why is that my dilemma? Because I can't create the change that they talked about necessary to bring about this solution, the psychic change of spiritual experience they describe in the back of the book, which we need to obtain, either through a sudden or by the educational variety. It does the same thing. And they talk about by going through this book, what takes place in a few months could seldom be brought about by years of self-discipline. Why can't we afford to wait years is because of the malady. The malady won't allow us to stay sober long enough to create this change because we suffer from an illness. Anybody know people here that's been relapsing? They're far advanced. Those who are not as far advanced can stay sober untreated for a couple months or years. And people have been able to get some relief, but they don't maintain it, and they go back to it because the insanity returns. They don't understand alcoholism, what a daily reprieve is. So they talk about going through this. Where and how am I to find this power that they talk about in 2 that's going to create this change? If I mean it, right? Wouldn't you think they would say here, this is how we think we hear it. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously, because we understand what they mean by that power now. It's their explanation of getting access to this thing, like they described on that page back when those 2 members of Alcoholics Anonymous visited that guy. They explained the problem. Then they outlined the solution they found. When Ebby was talking to Bill, he outlined the solution that he applied to his life. They explained the solution that made sense to the person who needed to obtain it, and why they needed to take the course of action, because they couldn't create the change themselves. So they talk about here, obviously, but where and how were we to find this power that creates this change? Now they would have said, well, just go with your own understanding, wouldn't they? They already give a couple examples of people who believe. So now we have a chapter here to the agnostic, and it covers 3 people. It covers the atheist, the true believer, and the agnostic. What do all 3 of them have a problem with? Okay, we'll read this really slow, okay? We're genius-type minds. Any genius-type minds here? Okay. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. What do these 3 people have in common? The true believer, the atheist, and the agnostic. Lack of power. So they need to explain what they mean by lack of power, that we could all join on. We could all meet at that place. What it means to me could be second. I came in from the evangelical crowd. I came in as a true believer, but my relationship with God had me terrified because of the teaching these people. I've had, when I was in a street gang in Toronto, we were called the Demons. I think I was 9 or 12 or 10. I forget what. My family, when I went to Timmins, there was the evangelical movement happening in the Roman Catholic Church. So they were switching over to evangelical. Like it was quite the, some of you remember, and then the business, it was quite the movement happening across Canada and America. So that was Benny Hinn and all those guys, Hill or whatever the guy laying on it. Like it was pretty spectacular stuff. There was big revivals happening in the basement of Roman Catholic churches and stuff like that. So I always kind of believe, I was always terrified of God, and I always kind of like had good reason based on what people were telling me about God. So I really didn't like the idea that this was really... So they took a vote that maybe I was demonically possessed. My family, sitting around a table. Said, there's something wrong with that boy. There's something... I'm in a gang, like remember, they're all evangelical Christians. I'm wearing this jacket with cut-off sleeves with swastikas and it says demons on the back because of the street gang I was involved in. And my hair's like this, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a terror. Like I'm a terror, right? I don't know if I was alcoholic, but I was sure working on membership. I was like locked up environment, like it was over and over and over. They got together and decided that I needed to have this exorcism. I had a profound experience with this thing that happened to me. I was traumatized. And I'm not even going to get into it, but it was like, holy moly. And then the guy who didn't understand, he says, you better watch yourself now, boy, because you're going to be more possessed than you were the last time. Scared the living crap out of me. Now I'm and then some things happen, and then all my family's looking at me at the family dinner, and they all voted again that maybe it didn't take hold the first time. And then they sent me back. I had a private meeting with these people. I'm not going to tell you what happened there, but spiritual experience, not likely. At a deep-seated level, it was blocking me, and I wouldn't have been able to tell because consciously, I knew there was a power, I knew there was God, and I believe every time I tried to get sober, I went right back to the church. I'm in the choir, I'm going to go. Like, it was a lot of different, like I had a split personality. Like when I was sober, I'm like suit, Baptist church, Nazarene. I've tried them all. And I kept on getting drunk. I thought maybe it was the wrong God. I didn't understand what they meant by lack of power. So by the time I finished this chapter, I went, I understand now what they mean by a power greater than themselves and where I get access to this power, that this power is actually within me. Would have never came up with that. And they talk about that on page 55. And they talk about, as we go through here, they talk about for everybody comes to this place, we need to ask ourselves one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? And once I could start from that place, we emphatically assure anybody a spiritual structure can be built. Bill sat in that place. We all sit in that place. I don't have to define God here. I was under the impression I had to have a relationship with God to move forward. They're saying no. What you need to have is a belief that if I do this thing, I'll get what they got. Do I believe that there is a source of power obtainable to me that these people got? If I did what they got, I'd get what they have. So on page 55, they talk about this. And they talk about where and how am I to find this power. And when they explained to me the solution, which wasn't my solution, I was able to choose my own conception of that. And what I took from their explanation of what the solution they found was a frequency. So when I started with this, I don't know who or what you are, but I believe you're there. Can you help me? That was my step 2. I don't know who or what you are, but I'm open to this thing because I'm dying of alcoholism. That was my step 2. And I believed, based on my decision, if I did what these people did, I'd get what they got. So I made a decision to do the rest of the work. And as they're talking about here, they talk about on page 54, is the human condition why I can't change me. Lack of power. They talk about because something happens at a core level beyond my ability to reach, that's eating my lunch, that's determining how I think, how I feel, and my response to life. It's the unmanageability that happens. When I get the memo, I've already made decisions on it, and I'm a prey to misery and depression. I have a high alert intensity about me. I'm just not quite right, and I don't know what that is, and I'm punishing the people around me, either verbally or emotionally. I'm not able to be the parent, the son, really on any consistent time. I can't even stand myself, never mind you people. I don't know, nobody been there? Anybody been there? But then I put on the, hi, good to see you. And then here, anybody have that? I call him the Neanderthal shows up, knuckle dragging. What do they want? Right? This thing in my brain, I don't know if anybody has that thing in your brain and you try to smile. Anyways, that's page 54. 55 talks about actually we're fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And what they talk to me about was accessing this by looking back in my life by this life force that was already there. And I was able to tap into it. There was that voice that talked to me in the darkest times of my life that said, what are you doing? This entity was already there. It's been there as long as I can remember. This thing that talked to me in my darkest moments that said, hey, there's something different. This thing that I talked to, the thing that said, what are you doing? I said, what? And I don't know if we all have that. The time I felt the most darkest, and then something happened where I felt hope. It created a shift within my being. And I said, yes, I have this thing. So I said, we're going to build with this thing. So when we got to step 3, and I'm going to hammer home these things, and you can look at them later if you want, is step 3. They talk about on page 63, is I'm making a decision to do the rest of the work. Step 3 is an idea. It's an idea that if I do the rest of the work, I'll be able to experience these things they're talking about. The alcoholic says, no, I could experience them in step 3, because if I could experience them in step 3, then I don't need to do the rest of the work. Remember, our first obsession is ourself. And we make decisions based on self that doesn't make any sense. That's why they put the book together. The book says this. The book says, even though this was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that have been blocking me from this life force that's already within inside of me. Right? So when I make this decision on page 63, that at the top of the page, they talk, when we sincerely took such a position, they mean, as the result of this course of action, they've experienced this, as we felt new power flow in. They're saying, now we're going to show you how to obtain or experience what we're talking about. Step 3 is an idea. If I was able to experience step 3 and step 3, I wouldn't need to do the rest of the steps. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away my difficulty is all ideas. Step 2 is an idea. What confirms step 2 is step 12. Step 12 makes it circular. I've now experienced what I was hoping for in step 2 by when I get to step 12. What I'm experiencing is 11, what they told me was available to me in we agnostics. I've had the experience now. It's moved from an idea to an experience. I have the recipe through going through 4, how to master resentments, how to outgrow fear. The 4th step is my start to my experience, what you people are talking about, so I can be a part of the collective. Once I experience, we're all on the same page. I could join the first 100 men and women by saying, yes, I too not only was like this, but I follow this course of action, I have what they have. It's the same experience. It's not separated. I don't have to say, well, God as I understand him. Why would I have to say that? Have you experienced the access to this power that created the change? Yes, that's all that needs to happen. It's simple. We don't need to isolate ourselves by separating ourselves in a fellowship. It's collective. We're in this together. We suffer from the same problem. We have the same solution. We have the same course of action. What that looks like in your life is totally dependent on your willing to apply this thing and your understanding of spiritual principles, right? So the purpose of the 4 is by the time I finish the 4, I see the access to this power. They talk about steps, page 71. They talk about, I've experienced some of this change and shift from the removal of the blockages, the difficulties, and outgrowing fear. I know what God's will for me at this stage of the game is, because they talk about it in the fear, is to play the role he assigns. The ability to stay present. That's what this, and no longer attached to all these things. And when I do my 5, 90% of this stuff is gone. And now what I was hoping for in step 3 is now taking place. I've entered the realm of the spirit. I've entered my relationship with a power greater than. I know how to get access to this power from within. I'm able to go through the archway. I call it from the Neanderthal experience into the spiritual experience, and it will never change. Either I'm fear-based and I'm Neanderthal-based, at gathering, conquering fear of things being taken from me, the anticipation of impending doom. That's an instinct-based life. When I'm living a spiritual-based life, I have this new intuitiveness. I don't regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I'm able to match calamity with serenity. I have a peace inside of me second to none, because I'm living on a spiritual basis. We'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. We'll suddenly realize that I got access to this power that creates the shift sufficient enough where I don't want to drink. I have something better than I ever experienced in my entire life. I have a new freedom and new happiness. So when I finish the 4 and 5, here's where I make friends. 76 is the second most least understood process in this thing, because what's our first obsession is ourselves. I want to work on me. Could anybody show me in this text or in our program of recovery outline, this book, where it says to work on you? Anybody? Everybody's obsessed with the idea of work. I'm working on myself. It explains the painful look on your face. Stop it. You're focusing on the problem. No, where it says practice these principles, it doesn't practice your thinking. Sought through prayer and meditate to improve my conscious contact, right? Praying for only knowledge of His will. That means I'm in counsel, I'm in relationship, I'm in marriage with something other than me. It's a part of me. It becomes something that's hard to explain, but when my wife and I aren't doing well, I feel it when I'm away from her. I can't deny it. I can't deny that something ain't right. And I need to make right in order to feel peace. We're connected at an internal level. We're part of each other. I don't know how to, and that's the same with my relationship with a power greater than myself. Once you explain experience the basis of this, no further explanation is necessary. It's like when someone tried to explain a drink to you before you had a drink, it didn't make any sense. But once you felt the magic in the drink, anybody needed to explain to you after that? That's like the spiritual answer. When you find this thing, or when it's revealed to you what's available here through this course, something goes boom inside and you go, whoa, this is pretty wild stuff. I've been looking for this thing my whole life. And when I practice these principles, I'm able to contain it on a constant basis. So step 6 and 7, really fast. I just finished my 5. And they talk about here the review of the meditation of my past. When we look at step 6, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all these things what we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go of, we ask God to help us be willing. What are they talking about there? Huh? Spirit, we hear defects, right? But that's what we get taught, defects, right? So who's the observer if it's defects? We are. What they're actually talking about there, and somebody mentioned it over there, what was it? Is all the things that I carried in my fore, resentment, fears, harms, my attachment to my past that I make excuse for, those things that I carry still. When I finish my 5, I still think I have these emotions still attached to these people. It's like when my friend talked to her, she seen me 2 years ago, she remembered 2 years ago the talk I had. And then we talked afterwards, and we realized it wasn't so much the talk that I was going through something, so I was explaining myself. She was going through something, and that emotion stayed locked. And today, she kind of went, that would be step 6 stuff. She's going to go experience, sorry for using an example, right? She's going to go experience something that she nearly talked herself out of because she was hanging on to something from her past, which was determining her present. Even God was saying, hey, go here. No. This thing is still determining my reality. That's the things we hang on to. And the whole idea is that it gets right-sized. I know what these things are, that I could, at the end of my life's journey, they'll be to a point where they're no longer determining my life. So she was able to pray, right? And says, you know what, allow me to go through this, which is the recipe that had her sitting here, and we had a nice conversation last night and today. I'm pretty sure we're on good terms. I don't know by the end of the meeting, but so who created the shift was her awareness of bringing it to a power grid and a source that created a shift in her psyche, allowing her to have a different experience. That's what step 6 is. Then step 7, so that means the stuff I carried with my dad, my mom. And so when I meet with them in step 11, right, when I meet with them and it didn't go well today, and I review my day, it's kind of, and it says, what could we have done differently? That means I review my day. It means I was living on instinct there. That old idea came back, that old attachment to this thing, it revisited itself because my spiritual condition has depleted. The instincts have come back, self-preservation's back. I'm going to handle this thing. I remember what they did to me, and now I can't shake it. So I need to get back on spiritual base so these things don't affect me. It's like a vessel, 2 vases with water, and you only have enough water to fill one. So when we come here, we're depleted, and it says there's another vessel available to us, and it's within you. We're going to give you access to this, and as you get access to this, it starts filling up this, and it's spiritual. And as you fill this up, you don't suffer from all those things that you carry anymore because you're having a different experience. And as you become spiritually depleted again, all these things start coming back. Does that kind of make sense? That's what step 11 is about. So here they talk about, I'm going to kind of finish up here. They said, when ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. That means my life is really none of my business anymore. Good and bad. I can't determine which is it because I'm driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. Most of my amends were based on good ideas for you that I had. Anybody? Anybody have to apologize for things? I was just trying to be helpful. Standing there minding my own business. Okay. All of me, good and bad, because it's the focus of self. Remember, what's our first obsession? Ourselves. So the mind is designed to get you talking to you. Because if you're talking to you, who are you not talking to? Your relationship with a power greater than yourself, in counsel with something else. Step 11 is a clock for living in a 24-hour period. But it don't want you living on spiritual principles. It wants you living like the Neanderthal. You being your own solution, gathering, being aware of, protecting, all this stuff. So they talk about here good and bad. So if you're really bad, who are you concentrating on? Self. And when you're really good, who are you concentrating on? It's the focus of self. It doesn't matter how you do it. You're still separated of the over-concentration of self. So here they're talking about here. It says, my Creator, I pray now that you should have remove from me every single defect of character stands in the way of my usefulness. That means my character defects are derivative of my spiritual condition. I'll never be without them because they're connected to my instincts. The character defect is not the problem. What the problem is they're connected to my instinct, which my instincts are connected to my spiritual condition. The instincts are a symptom of an underlying problem. It says, like when the smoke detector goes off here, you're able to hear the sound and you see the lights, and that's not the problem. That's letting you know that there's something else happening that you need to address. Going to shut that alarm off doesn't take care of the problem. The defect of character is the response to an underlying problem. Is it my social, my ambitions, my security? What's happening here that needs to be addressed on a spiritual level because I want to handle it my way. So one of the things that we're going to go, so that reminds me as a reconfirmation of step 3 that this power is going to take care of these things within myself that I can't fix. That my 4th step is what my life looks like on a non-spiritual basis. My 4th step is me on a non-spiritual basis. It's not what I used to be like, it's what I am like. So now it talks about I'm on a different footing, I'm having a different experience because I'm accessing spiritual principles that creates a shift. And that's what they talk about at the bottom of the page. You can read that later. We go out and clear out the wreckage of the past by our efforts of trying to live on self-will. Now we're on a different basis. If you're still feeling the same as you were after your 5, 6, and 7 as you did before your 4, you haven't done a spiritual exercise. You've done a behavioral modification exercise. There's 2 groups in AA. There are those that go work on themselves, and then there are those who look for a spiritual solution. By the time you finish your 5th step, the way it's laid out here, you've entered that spiritual realm, the 4th dimension. You have access to this thing. I'm going to close with this idea. So, we hear a lot of different things. Someone's going to walk up to you and say, hey, what step is this all about? What's the purpose to this whole thing? What's the purpose to this whole book? What's the purpose to everything here? What's the purpose to this whole thing? What's this whole thing designed on? What's the purpose of it? What would you tell them? So, page 85. Because what they're saying is we enter this relationship that becomes personal to us. The confirmation of that relationship is the psychic change or spiritual experience. Yes or no? So it's secondary. So we see first the access to the power, and the symptom of that becomes a psychic change or spiritual experience. So now that I've experienced that, what's the whole purpose of the steps? What's the most important step once you've done the first 3 in this whole thing? What is it trying to get you through to? How do I explain it?
Carrying a message.
So,
Storming back to Santa.
okay, so here we go. The purpose of the first 10 steps is to get you to a certain location. Now that you're here, step 10 is actually a transition step. It was never meant to be a working step. right? That's why all the steps that have action before stay action. We've just done that because the treatment centers really incorporated that idea of us working on ourselves. So all the steps, there's actually 6 working steps. So what happens is there's the transition steps, the preparation steps, and the application steps. Step 11 is the application step. Step 10 is the transition step, saying if you've done all these things, you should be experiencing this. Once you experience, what do we do with it? They talk about on page... I'll finish with these 2 ideas. Page 84, we've just entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of what? Of this relationship, the world of the Spirit. And then they talk about our next relationship is to figure out this thing that happens inside. And I'll close with this thought. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. Yes or no? If we have carefully followed directions. That's the big word, if, the pivoting point. If we followed this course of action laid out by them and I'm having the same experience, if, that means I've just pivoted to the other side of the purpose of this thing. If we have carefully followed direction, we've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we've become God conscious. We've begun to develop this vital 6th sense that they talked about in We Agnostics that become personal to you now, right? But we must go further. That means more action. Step 11 is the 24-hour clock. That's the step we're meant to live on a 24-hour spiritual basis. That's the development step. It's not step 10 of the concentration step. It's the understanding, where am I at spiritually? Where am I at with my relationship with the power grid on myself? Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact. What's the whole purpose of this thing? Is that relationship. Right? Praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. It's your will. It's always been your will. You've never had the ability to turn it over to God. It's your will. What you're going to do with it now is like step 10 says, here's your will back. It's to the care of. So when I go away and I go to my friend, hey, can you take care of my dog for me? Do I expect my dog back when I get home? Step 3 is the care of, because you know what? You have a problem. Let me look after it for you. Right? And then when we take care of that problem, now you can have it back. It's the proper use of will. Each day we ask what we need to do for the man who still suffers. We seek guidance and play. You need to be a participant in your sobriety. It's free choice. You get to decide what you want your life to look like now. You have created the life that you wanted based on you. So whether when you're new, you have a belief system that you believe what you spend all your energy on is your belief system. And what you believe to happen is your fate. And that's where you spend all your ideas. This is saying we want to give you a new belief system and a new fate. So we shift our ideas to a new belief system. We have a new belief system, a new fate, and a new outcome. We have 2 alternatives. An alcoholic death or spiritual life. My life is the way it is as the result of these steps. How I got to AA was the result of alcoholism. I was unable to change those fate. What happens is my fate got changed as the result of this course of action, which is in 10 and 11 and 12. Because step 10 says you need to go to step 11. 11 says you need to practice 12. If you read step 11 over the next couple days, it's an amazing step. I've had a really good time. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. You guys are awesome. And on a fast note, Yep.
I've learned something when you left me the message of this program. It's a God-given program for us alcoholics. And it's built on love and service. With prayers, you guys get the service for every year. And 5 months, 25 days. And I love you all. And that's how it works. And I got you in the week.
It's awesome. And when we have real fast note, we have one of the biggest big book study workshops in Canada, and a couple of the guys there to help other people. If you need extra help going through it and you can't read, we put these talks on where you could hear them on audio, and they'll guide you through the book on the principles and stuff like that. And we have the worksheets and everything that you can get a hold of. So anybody want to be a part of that, I think that's awesome. And hopefully we can close with the Serenity Prayer.
Nice try. Okay, where do you think you're going?
Serenity prayer. Get over here.
I like to fuck 'em.
So, what's the key ingredient to long-term sobriety?
Grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
In another 3 hours, buddy. Oh, God.